Good evening, everyone, and welcome again to Being a Dad. I think we're on episode 4 today, and we have Dr. Chris Millner.
Hello there.
Hi, Chris. Tell us a bit about yourself in a nutshell.
In a nutshell, I'm a recently retired GP and father of 5 children and have been foster parent. I'm not an expert in anything except making mistakes.
Awesome. And we have Josh White here. Tell us about yourself,
Hello.
Josh.
I am the very fortunate son of the handsome man on my left. I don't know if it's mirrored, so he's on my right, but it's Paul is my dad. Yeah.
And what are you doing now, Josh?
So I'm just finishing my first year at Moorlands Bible College, doing theology, which is really fun. And I'm getting married in November, which is very exciting.
Awesome. Cool. It's great to have you on the show or the program or whatever we're calling it. I don't know what you call it, the screening. We should also have Pete Millner joining us in a bit, who is the proud son of Chris, one of the proud sons of Chris. And but really what we're going to do tonight is we're going to talk about some of the things when things are not so ideal and when things are difficult in our family. And so we're going to cover some issues relating to special needs, disabilities, all of those kinds of things, which are kind of very high profile now. They're very talked about now, but nonetheless, as we talk about it, we might discover some things that make us realize just how challenging they are for the family, and not dads especially, but dads as part of the mum-dad team. And so we're going to have a look at those things. And part of the reason we've got Josh on will become clear as time goes on. But also Chris has had lots of experience of dealing with foster children who come with all kinds of issues, some particularly very special needs, and also being a GP and offering support and help and referrals to families that are dealing with those kinds of things. So I'm just going to say hi to a few people. First of all, I can see are watching. So hi, Jonathan Matthews. Hi, Isra. Hi, Colin. And great to have you guys with us. And anyone else who's watching on YouTube, I probably won't get to see who you are, but welcome anyway. So let me kick off just and set the scene a little bit. I think when our beautiful son came into the world, he was exactly that. He was beautiful. He was healthy and strong, very robust little chap. He had all the digits and limbs in the right place, and he was absolutely gorgeous to look at. And he was a charmer from the day he was born. There were a few things that didn't happen. Like one was he didn't see the need for sleep. And we thought, well, surely in the end, he'll get tired and he will go to sleep. It didn't seem to work. And we had all kinds of wise advice from all kinds of lovely people and books and so on that told us how to train your baby to sleep, how to bring up your toddler, and so on and so on. And everything we did just seemed to backfire. And anyway, so at the age of about 4, he started school at 4 because he was his birthday's in July. And so he came in as a very young person in his cohort who started school with him. And on occasions when Anna or I would pick him up from school, he would literally throw his bag at Anna and say, "I hate my life. I wish I was dead." And kind of looking at this little, you wouldn't believe it now, but looking at this little guy and thinking, where did all that anger come from? And how did he ever, who told him that kind of thing was something you could say when things weren't going well? And he'd been absolutely loved and doted on by mum and dad, and then his little sister adored him when she came along. He'd never been abused, neglected, ignored, anything like that, but absolutely loved and treasured, encouraged. We honestly, we loved him so explicitly and clearly. Yeah, and a lot of the time he was this lovely little guy, very creative, super intelligent, always wanting input, wanting your attention all the time, wanting to learn and be stimulated and so on. But then we noticed that his relationship with school started to taper off as he got older, and we would go into parent teacher consultation things and just listen to the kind of repetition of phrases like, well, he's quite intelligent, but, and all this kind of stuff. And he seems to want to be the class comedian. And why does he make silly noises? And he's very immature and all of this kind of stuff. And we're thinking, oh no. So I noticed that I was going to more of those and Anna was going to less. And I think what was happening was I was getting the short straw. And I would kind of run the gauntlet of the parents' evening. But also we had all kinds of challenges at home. There would be like quite frequent meltdowns, maybe 2 or 3 in a day, where literally anyone who's witnessed a meltdown will know what I'm talking about. But there was this kind of extreme paradox, because on the one hand, Josh was super intelligent, super smart, and super funny. He was always one jump ahead of us whenever we were in an argument or a disagreement, and he seemed to outsmart us every time we had any kind of conflict or disagreement. But in the end, things started to really unravel when Josh went to secondary school, particularly towards the end of around year 5. Sorry, not year 5. I don't mean that. Year 10, 11, it was very difficult. And then he went briefly to the 6th form, and it did completely unravel at that point. And I think it's true to say that Anna and I really did believe that we'd done everything we could, and yet we seemed to be epically failing. And there were some of the behaviors that Josh was getting into that were so contrary to the values that we'd been pouring into him since he was a baby. We just couldn't understand what else we could do. And when the police got involved, we were kind of thinking, we're really out of our depth now. And so, Joshy, I'm going to pause it there. Just tell us a little bit about what was going on inside you, because you knew that you were loved. Did you?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. No, I have honestly had the most wonderful upbringing I could imagine. It's unfair that I'm kind of, my actions portrayed my mum and dad as, these kind of monsters by, if I was a byproduct of being brought up by them, kind of thing. But it was wonderful upbringing. And I kind of, throughout the whole process of growing up and speaking to different doctors and people, like, I always struggled to understand that I kind of saw things differently and struggled with things that other people don't struggle with, because I always used to say that I've always been me, so I can't compare myself to anyone else, because as far as I'm concerned, everyone's like this. But there's a lot of it I can't remember, which is probably selective memory or something. But yeah, I don't know what the root of it was, but
I suppose what happened then was we got ourselves into, I think we really run out of ideas, and we thought we were failing really badly. And in the end, we we activated something because of some behavior Josh was doing, and we thought we've got to somehow get ahead of this. And we were all out of ideas. And in the end, things kind of coincided, and we were brought in front of a panel of professionals. And there was about, I think we went into this little room, and there was 13 professionals around this table. And we just thought it was going to be a couple of people, Anna and I, and we were so overcome. Anna just burst into tears and sat there like, she said, "Can you start?" Because they said, "Oh, tell us a bit about it." She burst into tears, and so I kind of start telling the story. And to my utmost surprise, because I had gone there somewhat skeptical, I must admit, to my utmost surprise, everyone around the table started nodding and sort of agreeing with each other, and yes, 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 and mentioning certain words to each other, like ASD and, you know, and all this kind of stuff, which I hadn't even heard of, you know, and I'm thinking, these people seem to be in on something about us that we don't know about. How did they even know this? And so then Anna picked up the story and talked some more. And I think probably as mum and as a teacher, she kind of had suspected that there was more to Josh than we'd originally understood. And I'd always thought he's a healthy boy. We're just not quite cracking the code. And if we can do that, we'll be fine. And it's probably us, you know. And then we ended up having a meeting with a child psychiatrist who was really lovely. And he spent an hour with Josh. And Josh was as contrary and just passive, just not cooperating. He just did the bare minimum that he was asked to do. And I'm thinking, this has been a total waste of time. We've wasted this lovely, beautiful doctor's time. And he said, "Oh, okay, thank you very much, Josh. Would you give us a couple of minutes while I talk to your mum and dad?" And then he said, so Josh went outside, and he said, "Well, I think, Josh, I've got huge respect for young people like Josh." And I'm like, "Oh, young people like Josh." And then I'm kind of thinking maybe there is something going on here. And he said, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's got a combination of Asperger's syndrome and ADHD." Well, one of the things that with the classic Josh was when he was in the sixth form at school, a bunch of buses were there waiting for the children to get on them to go home. And Josh noticed that one of them had a big red button by the emergency exit that said "press in emergency." So Josh thought, "Oh, I wonder what happens if I press this button." So he pressed the button, and the door flew off, like sort of by some explosive force. And the bus driver got out and was so angry, he threatened to knife Josh and took him to the head of the sixth form. And we had this sort of then huge, you know, thing. But that was a kind of typical thing that apparently was fairly to be expected if a child had ADHD and this kind of thing. I'm like, man. Anyway, so he said the reason your son is doing as well as he is because of you guys. Well, Anna and I looked at each other in disbelief and thought, I don't know, maybe we're in a film or something, and this is just unreal. We cried our eyes out, and then he got Josh in and said some things to Josh. And there we started on a journey of discovery. And at this point, I think it might be good to get Chris in, but I just want to say that sometimes parents are very, very keen to get a diagnosis. And it is probably worth saying that the diagnosis doesn't fix anything. So even though we now had two important words to kind of brandish, if you like, or to understand a bit more about our son, it didn't actually fix anything. We still had to take him home and start the journey of kind of learning what that meant. Chris, is there anything you would like to say from a GP's perspective on that one?
Yeah. The first thing to say is about labels. They can be at best, they're tools. They enable you to get to grips with the problem. At worst, they can make things worse. And we commonly come across kids with some sort of conduct disorder. The temptation to the parents, particularly if they're not well equipped in parenting skills, to say, "Oh, it's not my fault. He's ADHD. It's for the school to sort out or the doctor to sort out." And there's a risk people will bottle out. And before it was ADHD, it was E numbers. Back in the 90s, when hyperactivity began to be explored, people thought in terms of E numbers overstimulating children. That's gone out of the window now. I think there's a very small minority of kids who are affected by that. But we cared for a child with Asperger's and had not the same battle as you had, but a parallel battle. We've had some really difficult phases to it. And when she was seen by the experts at the children's unit, they said, "Yeah, we think she's got Asperger's syndrome." It was a great relief to us, and we rejoiced. And they said to us very sternly, "Be aware that a label brings as many problems as it solves. And if you're not careful, the teachers will relate to you as an Asperger's rather than as Joe Bloggs or Joshua White or whatever."
Yeah.
Because they've got a kit set in their mind of what Asperger's means. They relate to that stereotype. You see in newspaper headlines, we all do it. We think in shorthand. Trying to think of an example, but can't think of an example right off the top of my head. But once you've got a stereotype, you start to relate to it. And so at best, it opens up a bunch of things you can do and a bunch of resources that you can access. But it's not in itself the solution to the problem. I agree with Paul on that.
How did it affect you, Josh? Can you remember how you felt when we were? Can you remember we were walking out of the doctor's surgery and walking across the car park, and Mum said, "How does it make you feel?" Can you remember what you said?
I can't remember what I said. Do you? What did I say?
You said something. "I'm relieved because I know it's not all my fault."
Oh.
And I think it was like, I feel a little bit of kind of relief that there is actually something that people know about that makes me like I am. That I can get some help now.
Yeah, like it was. I can kind of remember the whole before being diagnosed, like just struggling so much with things and thinking, why on earth, like, can I not do this when everyone else seems to? And with various things, and it was a relief actually, to get it on paper, kind of thing, just to think, okay, like that answers a lot of questions as to why I found that difficult when, because I could understand that I could say read a list of things and be like, well, that's easy, but to understand it, but then to do it was a different thing. So it was kind of like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. That kind of fills in the gaps of why, But
yeah. So
I do agree with the label thing. I would never tell people about it, and kind of still don't. If I have to, I will. But it always made me cringe, especially as you kind of feel like you're in a sort of little group when someone says, "Oh, you've got Asperger's." You're like, okay. So when you hear someone's got Asperger's, you're like, "Oh, cool! Like I'm in the same group." But when you hear of other people at school who would kind of just be a naughty kid and then say, "Oh, I've got ADHD," it's like, well, yeah, but that kind of use it as a get out of jail free card is always what kind of upset me, and I was keen to not do. So I agree that it's useful with regards to medication and things, which I'm sure you'll talk about, but as a kind of, just all access pass to be badly behaved is not a good thing.
It was really amazing. I think when I had been very opposed to the idea prior to all of this, that giving a child medication to improve their behavior was really a bad idea. And it was something that I kind of was pathologically opposed to. And then the doctor suggested giving Josh something to help him sleep because he never did sleep. And do you know what? That was the wonder drug. Just getting Josh actually to sleep through the night. His mood was just 100% better.
Amazing.
And then they gave him something to help him to focus and finish. And the doctor did a funny. He said, "It's the 2 F words you're allowed to use, Josh." and then they gave him something just to kind of just take some of the stress out of. So it kind of dealt with the mood swings a bit. And I was just amazed. It wasn't an instant fix, but over those next months following, as they got the levels right and so on, we began to see a bit of shift in those entrenched behaviors. And what do you think was probably one of the biggest changes, biggest things that introduced a change to you in that time?
The medication was an utter godsend, like just incredible. Like being able to sleep and not wake up like 5 or 6 times is just amazing. And to be able to wake up and stay awake was just such a treat. And the Concerta, which is a form of, it's like a slower release Ritalin, I think. I don't know, Chris, is that right? I don't want to spread false information. That kind of allowed me to stop before things just get out of control, and just it didn't change my personality at all. It didn't take away like the essence of who I am, but it just helped me to function appropriately in the way I should, in the way that I'm kind of intelligent enough to operate. So
and
it kind of...
You left school and you got a job doing what, Josh?
I was an undertaker.
For how many years?
7.5 years, from 17 till 24. Was it? Must have been 20.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So what we noticed with Josh was when towards the evening, his sense of humor would become completely lurid and outlandish and completely inappropriate. And so if on those odd occasions that Josh turned up for work and hadn't had his Concerta, they would come by in the hearse and pick them up for him because he wasn't, it was just too much of a liability having an unleashed Josh make cracking jokes at the crap. It's like, where's the boundary?
Yeah.
Oh, it was back there. The boundary was 2 miles ago. Oh my.
Yeah.
So Josh became an undertaker, and I think what was amazing in that time was the amount of people who encountered Josh that I knew, encountered Josh at a funeral or as a bereaved relative, and just said how professional, how courteous, how respectful, and all the rest of it Josh was. And I thought, wow, this is truly amazing. This is, I think it is a miracle. And, you know, sure, we really acknowledge the place of the medication, and we acknowledge the place of the doctors who were brilliant. But I think we continue doing what we've been talking about in the first 3 sessions about creating the atmosphere of in the home of encouragement and upbuilding, and we always continue to speak affirmation into Josh and to call it, if you like, call out his destiny that we could see in him, and to sort of agree with the way God sees him and speak that kind of stuff into his life and call it out. But you weren't really buying, were you, Josh, on that front?
What, in there?
On the God stuff.
Yeah. I had my my 40 years in the wilderness.
You've gone very blurred, Josh. I think someone needs to pay the electricity bill where you are.
Sorry.
No, you're all right. Keep going. We can still hear you. Yeah. Go on.
Yeah, I had a few years where I wasn't going to church or having anything to do with Jesus, and then one day just decided that I should give church a go, and then just fell back in love with Jesus. And since then, it's just been incredible. My life has just gone just in a totally different direction, hasn't it? And yeah, just to to think back through that kind of difficult period for all of us, for me and my family, and to see what God's done in that, the real Romans 8:28 kind of manifestation of that, and the testimony it is now. And yeah, it's just been incredible. And yeah, Jesus is amazing.
One of the, so Josh has undersold the story, but we haven't really got time to go into it all. But it was a very exciting story. But one of the things that when Josh pulled out of the 6th form halfway through, kind of like academically, it looked like, oh well, well done, Josh. You're clever, but you're not gonna, that's maybe university. I don't think you'd have coped with it at the time, probably. But then, so now you've just completed your first year, and how's that been going at university? How's that been going?
Really well. I've been getting kind of mid-70s in all my essays, which is amazing. And yeah, doing really, really well. I'm really enjoying it and just feeling really well equipped and kind of ready for it, and which, to think back of my kind of past education life, it's phenomenal, isn't it? I don't think any of us thought I'd be where I am, but
that's really good. So
yeah,
awesome. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to pick out a few things that, if you're a dad or a mum even, and you're listening and you've got some special needs issues going on in your family, it really does require a team, doesn't it, Chris?
Yeah.
And it's not enough for one to just let the other one do all the heavy lifting in terms of the understanding the problem that we're dealing with and the issues. In my marriage, Anna, my wife, her way of coping with a crisis is to find out as much information as she possibly can about the issue. And so when we had the diagnosis, she suddenly had this pile of books about a foot high or 2 foot high of all Asperger's, ADHD, all dealing with the, and all these things about dealing with children with these issues. And so her response, we were on courses, we were cramming information in to find out about the way forward. But excuse me, what she really needed as well was for me to be an equal partner in that, and not just to say, oh, well done, darling. When you finish doing all the research, break it down and give it to me in bite-sized chunks. She wanted me to be alongside, so we were learning together. Is there anything you want to just feed in about the kind of dynamics, Chris, when you're within a husband, wife, partner's team, bringing up a child with special needs?
Well, I think they're general principles, aren't they? I remember a guy called Walter Trobish in a book called I Married You years ago, saying that the family is like a triangle, and the father and mother are like the two parts of the roof, and the kids are underneath. If the dad and mum are together and working together, they shield and shelter the kids and produce an environment the kids can grow in. You can't really fix the kids without prioritizing the marriage, I think. I think working on the marriage, working with the problem as a team, yes, but before that, building the marriage and the relationship, it's got to come first. Particularly as a husband, your first responsibility is to your wife. And if she's thriving, if she's in an environment where she feels nurtured and cared for and listened to, then she reaches the fullness of her productivity and fruitfulness, and that has an impact on the kids that nothing else can have.
Yeah.
But yes, when there's a difficulty like behavior disorder or a physical or mental illness in a child, the only way to cope with it really is as a team.
Yeah, and it's important that we don't allow the disability or the difficulty or the special need, if you like, to drive a wedge between us, because it will if we let it, and we can end up with a kind of characterized view of the other one where we don't actually let them in to become part of the solution, or where we kind of think, no, that's their thing, that's what they do, I go to work and earn the money to pay for it. That isn't a get out, guys. Even if you have a demanding job, Chris was a GP working 12-hour plus days and coming home, and the minute he got in through the door, it's game on. Chris is like tagged in, right, you're on. Is that right, Chris?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So what time did it stop? Did it stop?
Depending on what we were doing when we were short-term foster caring, sometimes we would go on all night.
Wow. And then you get up and get your doctor's bag and go off to work in the morning.
Yeah, well, in the early days, I was on call from home, so I might be up 2 or 3 times in the night as well. Called out. Not every night, obviously, but one night a week and one weekend in 5. I would be on for 24 hours. So.
Chris, you must really believe in parenting to give it that level of commitment.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's anything, whatever your job, if you become Prime Minister of the United Kingdom or President of the United States or invent a cure for cancer, the most important thing is your wife and family. What sort of a job have you done?
I wrote down a list of things that, so sometimes guys are accused of not being very good at talking about feelings and not being, hi Pete, welcome on the show. Woohoo! We're calling it a show now. Did you notice that? You're on TV, Pete. But you're quiet. We can't hear you.
I'm sorry about that. Let me see if I can get my mic up a bit.
We've got so anyway, I've got this list of things I wrote down, which if we're struggling with empathy, here are a few things your spouse or your partner might be feeling when dealing with a child with special needs. Exhaustion. It's not rocket science, but like she will probably be feeling exhausted because taking care of a special needs child takes extra time, and getting to all the appointments and doing the research and doing all the things that need to be done internet, form filling, letter writing. It takes hours and hours. Being on hold on the phone while you get through to the right person. Oh my, exhausting. And then there's the other children. If you've got a family already. So number 2, envy, seeing other people's children developing normally, children without the challenges your child has. I was talking to a lady once, and she said that she married this guy, and he had 2 children of his own that were already in their late teens, and they both had learning disabilities and massive behavioral issues. And they she gave herself to love him and to help bring up those children as if they were her own. And then, miracle of miracles, when they'd given up hope, because he'd had an industrial accident and hurt himself, they conceived the child, and so excited they were going to have their own child. And then, after a few weeks of the child being born, they were told it had some kind of syndrome, and it's another of these invisible disabilities where the child would just be just a complete little hooligan and difficult, very unmanageable child, just chaotic but not because of just being naughty, just like from almost the early days and weeks they knew this was happening. And she said you just sit on the bus and everyone avoids you, and it's like you've got this invisible disability that everyone can see the result of it. Anyway, so envy, aloneness, you feel like you're cut off from friends, they don't want you around because your kids are too disruptive. You might be scared about the child's future, what happens when you and your partner are no longer there and able to provide, how to make the best decisions. I know lots of parents of children with special needs have been, oh gosh, which school should we send them to? Hope they get in. Oh no, there's no places left. And you may go down into survival mode, and it may be that your wife doesn't want sex anymore, and it may be she doesn't want you pestering her. Do you know what I mean? It's like you feel like a sex pest just for thinking like that might be fun now and again, and so on and so on. And so, yeah, it can be a massive challenge. And of course, the sense of failure is never far behind. So if you're looking for some clues as to what your spouse might be feeling, there's a little list.
Can I just say that list is almost identical to the warning signs of professional burnout in the medical profession.
Wow.
Exactly the same reasons, really. We're seeing people spiraling out of looking after COVID-19 patients with all of these symptoms.
Wow.
So they've just been running out of resources, and you run on empty for a bit, never empty left.
Pete, welcome to being a dad. Just tell us real quick about yourself. How many children have you got?
Hi, I hope you can hear me okay. Is that all right, volume-wise?
Spot on.
Great. Well, I have 2 kids. They're Chloe, who's 9, nearly 10, and Ruben, who's 7.
Wow.
And they're both tremendous. They're both incredibly different. And they come with their own little things that remind me of me and things that remind me of Sarah. And parenting is my favorite. It's honestly, from quite a young age, I think I felt like I was born to be a parent. I've always loved children and wanted to have children. But obviously, whatever picture you've got in your head about what it'll be like in your younger years, it's very unlikely to be how it is as it goes out and works its way out, that's for sure.
So who was your role model, Pete?
I had lots of role models, actually. My number 1 role models were my parents, definitely. Yeah. I think they shaped my main kind of prime movers in terms of the things I cared about most, for sure. And seeing them figure stuff out. And I actually had the privilege, not everybody has this, but because quite a lot of my siblings are quite a lot younger than me, I was able to be an older teenager in the house for a while and see them parenting smaller ones. and that was quite an eye-opener, you know, learning what it would look like to handle a person who had, you know, special educational needs, for instance, or, you know, how you deal with raising a baby or a toddler. If you can see that experience sort of hands-on in your middle teens, then I think it was a huge bonus for me to have sort of understood what it would mean to sort of change nappies in the middle of the night and deal with poorly babies and stuff like that from a sort of emerging adult perspective. And that was a big deal. But I actually found that sort of being in a church context gave me another multiple of that, really, you know, a much wider field of vision, because, you know, seeing kids being raised in different sorts of households, you know, where there's different kinds of resources available, kids that are richer than you growing up, kids that are poorer than you growing up, and parents who have two parents working and one parent working and no parents working. So I feel like I've had a really good kind of education in my early life in terms of what being a parent could look like. But as I say, there's no preparation that you could ever have for it when it actually comes along. That is for sure.
Brilliant. You mentioned on being an older sibling to a child with children with special needs. Did you ever feel like their needs were so special that yours were slightly out kind of matched by their kind of demanding blah blah blah?
Yeah, oh, for sure. I mean, I do think that will be universal, and I think most studies that are out there about what the roots are of what you call attention needing behavior, quite a lot of that is all embedded in whether or not a child grows up feeling like they're noticed and whether they matter and things like that. And I by no means had the most kind of serious problems with that kind of phase of adolescence, but there were some pretty harrowing battles, weren't there, Dad? And some really tough moments where my kind of need for approval and attention and outlets of all sorts of different sorts was in some way kind of brought forward by feeling like my house was always too busy or too noisy or too full of screaming, or, you know, full of people who were more important than me or whatever it was. And you know, looking back in my 30s now, it's like that whole idea seems, you know, very sweet and naive now, but it definitely felt like that at the time. There were times when, you know, you'd come home from school and there'd be another person in the house and you wouldn't know how long they'd be there. And they might be sharing your toys and your television and your breakfast cereal for the next couple of days or weeks or months or years. And as a child, you don't get any say in that. You know, there's no way for parents to be able to make judgment calls like that. For instance, in fostering, you know, being governed by whether or not the other kids fancy it. You know, I know my parents didn't take on foster kids as a, you know, it wasn't in any way completely in isolation from the kids, from me, for instance. But, you know, that was what life was like. You know, we would have new foster brothers and sisters.
Did your mum and dad try and enlist your buy-in at any point? Come on, Pete, we need you on side. We need to be Team Millner here and get this show on the road.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know about sort of so clearly in terms of an invitation. It wasn't ever like, you know, I need you on board for this one. I don't suppose they did need me in that sense. Absolutely. But I could tell even from being a child when I was helping and when I was making life hard for everybody else in the family. And I think as a dad, I feel like I owe it to my kids to show them when that happens, to let them know that their choices are affecting everybody in the family. When I was a teenager, somebody shared something with me about there's this Bible story about Jonah, and he doesn't do what God wants. And when God sends the storm to remind him who's boss and call him back, the storm affects everybody in Jonah's boat. And they're all being rocked sideways by the storm that comes. And in my times where I've not been mucking in and not helpful and actively being antagonistic and big brothery with younger siblings, for instance, whether I was giving in to the urge to tease or bully or manipulate because I was bigger and stronger than most of them. And yeah, it affected everybody. And I had to see what that looked like working its way out to the rest of the family. And I could tell when we worked together as a team, when we did routines together and we did tidying up together and clearing up after meals together and things like that. There was a sort of sweetness to when it worked well that was more than just a like, oh no, I hope it doesn't get bad kind of a thing. It was more like a, oh yeah, I actually believe it could be like this more of the time, I think. And there's a sweetness to it that is worth working for. And I think that came out of that whole process very clearly for me.
So good. So good. I think just to, we've not got long left, unfortunately, but just to pull some things together, I think, Josh, when one of the sweetest things that we've seen in recent years is a part of the girl, because Josh has got three younger sisters, how much they love you and how much they value you now as a big brother that they felt a little bit robbed of when you were more of a handful. And tell us a bit about the weddings, because
it's like you do kind of like what Pete was saying, you know, it is difficult not to be antagonistic and kind of things that seem to come so naturally and so quickly to an older brother. And yeah, so Emily and Jasmine are both married, and I did a speech at both of them, and it was kind of my chance to just formally apologize, and it was emotional, wasn't it? And it was
stunning.
Powerful for me. And you know, since sort of post diagnosis era, our relationship is just incredible now, and we're so close, and we really do love each other. And they always loved me, and they were always trying their best with me, and it was only until I kind of was trying to that it worked. And it's tragic and heartbreaking to think back, but so good. And you know, thank you, Jesus, that from now on it's as wonderful as it is.
It has been an amazing journey of healing and restoration, hasn't it? And I think the wedding just seems to be the icing on the cake, if we're not pumping too much there. But I just want to wrap up with a couple of thoughts, really. One is, if your child does have a diagnosis, let not everything be about that. Don't talk about their special needs all the time. Talk about them as a child and celebrate their successes, and in the same way you would another child who doesn't have the same needs. And don't let it all be label, like Chris said or Josh said. I think it's really interesting that Josh doesn't feel it's necessary to introduce himself as on the autistic spectrum. And in fact, I think looking at him now, it's hard to see where it is, except when there are the odd moments it comes out a little bit. But it's been an incredible thing. But I think, let's believe that and encourage that child to blossom. And if you're a praying person, great. If you're not, bear with me. But we've always prayed, God, let those things that are part of the autistic spectrum disorder that are like a strength to Josh, let those things remain, and the things that are a disability, let those fade out. And so we've kind of been just celebrating those unique things that Josh has that could be part of that spectrum, such as this incredible sort of quick wit thing and his ability to very quick on the uptake. And the ability to obsess about something like studying now is a huge strength. And but it's like that ability to shut out the distractions and hunker down and study. And Pete, that's been the same for you, hasn't it? Although you might not put yourself on the spectrum, but you've also got quite an ability to block out distractions and focus.
Yeah, I think discovering that, I do think that late teens is a time that very few young men do well, for sure. And it's far more likely that you'll see a fair amount of crashing and burning at that time than you're far more likely to see that than you are to see someone age 18, 19 or 17 who's ready to be a man and be a dad and act like a man and behave like somebody who's setting a tone for their environment, for instance. And definitely I did myself a huge favor by not going to university straight after school, because I hadn't learned to put into practice those really important values of working and deciding to work and being motivated and self-starting and having fortitude and all those things. They're ideas I knew about. I understood what it would mean to have them, but they just weren't in me at that time. And I think one thing I would speak to myself as my kids grow up is not to place sort of too much hard and fast kind of railroad tracks for them at that age, because it's almost certain that if they are already motivated and ready for it at that age, that the path will sort of present itself. And sometimes it may well be better to go and get a kind of low-paying job after school, or work in something else, and try not to sort of just go to university because that's what people do. I think that's something as fathers we have to help our kids navigate, is learn how there are other routes to fulfilling adult lives other than just going through the channel of following school and doing A-levels and then doing university just because that's how most people do it. And for me, waiting till I was my early 20s was a real favor for me, for sure.
Brilliant.
It was a learning thing for me to discover that that's much more possible now than it was in my day.
Yeah. Chris, any more words of wisdom on the special needs, the child with special needs, and how to succeed in that area?
I think get help from the school if you can. Get help from medics if it's available, and from friends when if you're not coping, be honest about it. Be real about where you're at. It's not easy.
Don't make enemies. Don't make enemies of the school. No,
if you can avoid it. I think there's a balance, isn't there? Experts are experts in their subject, but you're the expert in your child. And I think on the one hand, the instincts you have about your child are likely to be correct, and don't abandon them lightly, but do listen to experts and do take advice if you can.
Yeah. So dads, avoid poor coping mechanisms such as when you become mechanical, non-emotional, shut down, unreachable. Avoid closed down communication such as angry outbursts and passive aggressive behavior. Avoid creating a secret world for yourself with online porn and gambling and overwork or recreational drugs. Avoid spiraling debt, alcohol, compulsive eating, all of that stuff. Talk to your friends, get someone to pray for you, give Chris Millner a call, give Pete Millner a call, give Josh a call.
Give Paul a call.
Yeah, talk to somebody, and there is a God who loves you and will help you, and he's the best father of all. And we hope it's been helpful to you today. Kev just made a comment. He said, touching on last week and this week, my wife was fostered at 2 years old. When we came to having children, my wife had no role model. We had to team up, and she followed my lead as I had parents to relate to. We did it and have 2 great daughters. They diagnosed my wife with learning disabilities when she was younger, which would influence her life. We overcame these problems together. My children understand and have been so supportive. That is such a great story, Kev. And so even if you you start out life with seemingly a poor deck of cards, a poor hand of cards, whatever, there's redemption. This can work out okay, and there is help around, people who will love you and support you and cheer you on. Josh, Pete, do you want to say a couple last words before we go?
Yeah, I just feel like as a dad, you have to get used to the fact that you are stronger normally than everybody else in the room. And that is a huge deal. And if you decide that everybody in the family is going to have a terrible day, you do have the power to make that happen.
Wow.
And if you want to moan and shout and grump and ruin everybody's day, you have immense power to be able to do that. But it's so important to learn the gift of actually setting the tone in a way that we do appreciate, setting a spiritual climate we actually like in our house, because we also have immense power to do that too.
Yeah.
Fabulous. What a great note to end on. Josh, anything else?
No, that was good. I can't live up to that, so we'll leave it there.
Listen, guys, thank you so much for
thank you
joining us, and it's been a blast. And we'll see you again same time next week. Don't forget to share and like and everything else, all that social media stuff. And keep up to date with Prayer House Weymouth on YouTube and everything else. God bless you. Take care. Thank you.